Hi everyone, Roman Jenkins here. I wanted to thank Dumbcumpster / Pause My Neghole for mentioning me in his last video. It's a really great video. You guys should go to his channel, which I've linked in the description, and check out anything he does, because most everything he puts up there is either him playing really well at Call of Duty or him lifting a crazy amount of weight. So check that out. But I want to continue on the Let's Learn, Let's Teach program that I've been doing, and I want to discuss a program that's a very odd program in U.S. aviation, especially military aviation history, and that is the 117, the Nighthawk. This program was basically conceived in the mid-70s and first tested in 1981 and ended its service in 2008. It was exclusive to the U.S. military. It didn't really have any variants. It had some proposed variants. It was a one-seat, two-engine craft, and it was notable for using a different type of stealth than what the earlier Lockheed Martin SR-71 had used. The SR-71 used composite materials and a stealth or a radar-absorbing paint to mask its radar profile. The 117 did not use this. It went subsonic, and it used a facet design in in the plane, and the swept-back wings and such that are kind of iconic of the B-2 Spirit bomber are shared with this smaller bomber. Now, this is because in 1964 a paper escaped Russia suggesting that if you were to facet the design of a plane instead of creating the smooth lines and contours that we're so used to on something like the F-14 or the F-18 or the F-16 or the F-22 or the F-35, you would actually get a much smaller radar profile, because it would scatter the radar waves instead of letting them go back to the radar station and be detectable. So this was very appealing because it would be a cheaper way than investing in radar-proof materials and going through a bunch of engineering stuff in that regard. However, it was nearly impossible to design something like this and still fly. At the time, the computer systems that would allow you to fly something that wasn't a normal fighter or bomber design were just not small enough to fit into a plane and still leave room for a pilot, engines, and bombs. So this kind of idea was shelved by the US and Russia until Lockheed, Northrop Grumman, the maker of the B-2 Spirit bomber, and I believe Rockwell all competed for a stealth bomber contract. And the Northrop contract and the Lockheed design were both using this hopeless diamond configuration, as they call it, making use of these really swept back wings and these odd angles that weren't really tenable as early as 5 years before because of computer technology. Now Lockheed developed the 117 that we're talking about, and about 1979, and it flew its first flight in 1981 in Area 51, which is probably only going to help the crazy people who say they see alien craft, because this thing does not look like it should fly, and it does not look like it should be from this world. Now, the 117, some of the fun things about it from its testing days kind of stuck over into production. For example, the letter F carried over from testing to production. So this is actually a strike bomber. It's meant to come in, do a very exact run, or drop a couple laser-guided munitions and get out. It's not a fighter plane, as the F would designate. This was done in development to attract top-level pilots to it. You needed to be a very skilled pilot to fly this thing. And the 117 actually comes from its call sign when it was in development and doing first testing, because at the time, the U.S. was running MiG tests, and they had bought MiGs out in the world and brought them to the U.S. for testing in comparison to their own planes. And this required a level of secrecy because they didn't want the Russians to know they had this, or any other planes. So this was given the call sign 117, and it kind of stuck, which makes it very confusing for me because when I go to work and I hear there's a problem with the 117 engine, I get kind of weirded out because these are actually made by GE and not Pratt & Whitney. Pratt & Whitney has an engine called the 2000, which is actually used for cargo planes and transports, and it shares the same designation, the F-117. So, fun fact about Pratt & Whitney. So, when this was done with testing in about 1983 and entered service, it wouldn't see actual use until 1989 and wouldn't be officially reported or admitted to being a project until 1988. In 1989, it carried 2 missions out in Panama, and that was it. It was basically not used until 1991, where it flew something close to 1,300 missions in Iraq and hit 1,600 targets and had a really good attack to hit ratio because it was using these laser guided munitions that became kind of iconic from the first Gulf War. So after that, it served basically anytime they needed a stealth bomber to go into an area that was heavily saturated with SAM sites, which was why this was so heavily used in Iraq because of all the SAM weaponry in the country. Now you have to remember this project was created because of all the SAMs that were used in Vietnam shooting down the Thunder Chiefs, because those things were basically going to get shot down because they were so huge. But by decreasing the radar profile, they really made this a very viable craft for something like that, despite the fact it couldn't go past the speed of sound, because it would actually raise its radar profile. Now, there's other things you can do in a stealth craft to raise the radar profile. With the 117, you could do anything to its skin, and it would cause a problem because of how balanced and how perfect these angles had to be to keep the radar profile scattered. But you could open the bomb bay doors, for example. And if you do that, maybe an enterprising Yugoslavian during the 1999 war in Yugoslavia might target you when he oddly set his SAM site and shoot you down, and get a Wikipedia page for it. Zoltan Dani shot down a 117 while he was commanding a surface-to-air missile squadron in Yugoslavia in 1999. This is seriously the major accomplishment and mention on his Wikipedia page, as I found out today. I wanted to say Draven Drunkel, or Smelly, as he's known on the forums, actually pointed this out. I had to go check it out, and I found out the guy had a Wikipedia page. I usually do these from memory and from what I know about the craft without going to Wikipedia. So when I checked that out, I was kind of impressed. So when this was shot down in 1999, that was actually the first instance, and as far as I can tell, the only instance of a U.S. stealth plane being brought down. There have always been crashes on takeoff and landing of stealth craft. There's takeoff and landing crashes of every craft. That is just a fact you have to deal with when you fly. The takeoff and landing are the most dangerous parts. So this came down, and it's the first of its kind, and it's kind of be remarked on until the 135 gets taken down at some point. Or the 35, I'm sorry. 135 is the designation for the F-35 engine. So this plane saw heavy use through the Yugoslavian conflict. It kind of ended its service about a decade after that in 2008, when it was mothballed in order to make way for the F-22 Raptor, to add more of those to the fleet, and with the anticipated launch of the F-35, and the fact that, we had stealth missiles by then. All these factors kind of killed it, and it's kind of fun because 2 of those things, the 35 and the 22, are Lockheed Martin products. But what's notable is the 117, like I said, could not go past the speed of sound, and a major factor was getting in and getting out quickly. So having something that go to full afterburner and get in and out of an area was very important to striking, and this was deemed inadequate by that point. So even though this is kind of an old, forgotten craft now, there's not a lot of information out there about it that's really good. it shows kind of a progression of technology, going from not being able to make this design to actually putting it out there and having it be a very successful at what it does craft, and kind of leading the way on stealth technology alongside the B-2 Spirit bomber is really impressive. So I hope you guys have learned something today, and I will see you next time, where I may or may not cover the B-70 or the XB-70 bomber with my girlfriend. Bye.